I sat stiffly in the leather chair across from Attorney Thomas Anderson, my hands folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. The mahogany desk between us gleamed under the office lights, polished to perfection, just like the careful words he was selecting. 3 days after burying both my parents, I was here for what I thought would be a standard inheritance meeting. I watched his lips move, but the words sounded distant, as if coming through water. Your parents left everything to your brother Jason. Everything. The family home, the hardware store they had built from nothing, their investments, even the family heirlooms. I had received nothing despite sacrificing my career to save their business. I smiled, politely thanked the attorney, and walked out knowing exactly what I needed to do. 3 years ago, my life had been completely different. I had a corner office at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago, a sleek downtown apartment, and a career trajectory that made my college classmates envious. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Suzanne, we're going to lose the store," my mother had said, her voice cracking. "Your father won't admit it, but we're 6 months from bankruptcy." The family hardware store, Anderson's Home and Garden, had been the center of my childhood. I grew up stacking paint cans, learning to cut keys, and eventually helping with the accounting. My parents had poured 30 years of their lives into that store, and now they were watching it slip away during the economic downturn. "What about Jason? Can he help?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He's focused on medical school in California," my mother replied. "We can't ask him to give up his future." But apparently they could ask me to give up mine. After a sleepless night, I made the decision. I resigned from my $60,000 a year job, gave up my apartment, and moved back to Riverdale to save the family business. My boss thought I was having a breakdown. My friends called me crazy. But family came first. That was what my parents had always taught us. The store was in worse shape than I'd imagined. The inventory system was still on paper ledgers. Their website was a single page with incorrect hours. Local competition from big box stores had eaten away their customer base. But I saw potential where my parents only saw decline. "We need to modernize," I told them during my first week back. "And we need to focus on what makes us different, personalized service and expertise those big stores can't match." My father was resistant at first. "We've always done fine the old way," he insisted. "The old way is killing the business, Dad," I replied gently. "Trust me. This is what I do for a living." Slowly they came around. I invested $12,000 of my savings into a new inventory system. I built a proper website with online ordering capabilities. I started workshops on weekends that brought in new customers. I established a loyalty program that kept them coming back. Within a year, the store had turned around. Sales were up 30%. We had hired 2 additional employees. My parents were amazed, and they made me a promise I held onto like a lifeline. "This store will be yours someday, Suzanne," my father said one night after we'd closed up. "You saved it. You deserve to carry it forward." My mother nodded in agreement. "We'll update the will next month when we meet with Thomas." But next month turned into next season, which turned into after the holidays. And somehow the will was never updated. Meanwhile, I watched from social media as Jason enjoyed the California sunshine, attending medical conferences in San Diego and taking weekend trips to wine country. Then came the call I never expected. "Susie, I'm in trouble." Jason's voice was hushed and desperate. "I need $15,000. And I need it fast." "What happened? Are you hurt?" "No, I've been gambling. I thought I could win back what I lost, but it just got worse. These guys, they're not patient people. Please, Susie." I transferred the money that night from my dwindling savings, extracting a promise from him to get help. He swore he would, and I believed him because that's what sisters do. 2 more years passed. The store continued to flourish under my guidance. I reminded my parents occasionally about updating their will, but they always had reasons to postpone. After tax season, after inventory, after the holidays, then came the accident. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel on the interstate during my parents' anniversary trip to the mountains. They were gone instantly. No goodbyes. No chance to finally have them sign that updated will. The night after the funeral, as I sat alone in my apartment above the hardware store, I realized something that would change everything. I still had access to all the family accounts. As the de facto business manager for 3 years, I controlled the online banking, vendor accounts, and payment systems. My parents had trusted me completely with the financial operations. Jason might have the inheritance on paper, but I held the keys to how it actually functioned. Grief comes in waves, they say, but for me, it came alongside a growing sense that something wasn't right. Between arranging the funeral and managing the store, I began quietly investigating the family finances in greater detail. My first discovery came while going through my father's email to notify his friends and colleagues about the funeral arrangements. There, buried in his inbox, were exchanges with Jason that made my blood run cold. "Dad, I'm worried about Suzanne's commitment to the business long-term," one email from Jason read. "She's always talked about returning to Chicago eventually. If she inherits the store, she might just sell it to the highest bidder and leave you and Mom's legacy behind." It was a complete fabrication. I had never spoken about returning to Chicago. In fact, I had declined 2 headhunting offers in the past year, specifically because I was committed to the family business. More emails revealed Jason's careful manipulation during his rare visits home. He would arrive with expensive gifts, take our parents to fancy dinners, and spend hours looking through old photo albums with them, playing the role of the devoted son, while I was too busy running their business to join these memory lane trips. The next revelation came when I accessed our parents' banking records. Jason had maxed out a credit card in my father's name just 3 months before the accident. The charges were all from casinos in Las Vegas. His gambling problem hadn't stopped, it had escalated. Most disturbing of all, I discovered that Jason had already taken out equity loans against the house and business property he had inherited. The applications had been filed the very day after the funeral. He hadn't even waited for our parents' bodies to be cold before leveraging their life's work for cash. I needed confirmation that I wasn't misreading the situation, so I called Margaret, my parents' closest friend who had been like an aunt to Jason and me growing up. "I hate to be the one to tell you this, Suzanne," Margaret said over coffee at her kitchen table. "Jason visited your parents just before their trip. He spent an entire day with your father at the attorney's office. The day before the accident." My hands started trembling. Margaret nodded sadly. "Your mother called me afterward, upset. She said there had been a change to their will, but wouldn't give details. She mentioned something about Jason needing security for his future medical practice." I thanked Margaret and left quickly, needing space to process this betrayal. As I drove aimlessly around town, my phone rang. It was Jason. "Hey sis," he said, his voice suspiciously cheerful. "I was thinking about the store." "What about it?" I kept my tone neutral despite the anger building inside me. "Well, since you're already there managing everything so well, maybe you could just continue doing that. You know, for the family. I'm still finishing up my residency and can't possibly run a business right now." What he meant was, keep making the money while I collect the profits. "Sure, Jason. I can help during the transition." The lie came easily. "I'll need to remain as the account manager for now, so things run smoothly." "Great. I knew I could count on you." His relief was palpable. "Oh, and can you make sure the monthly profit transfers continue? I've got some expenses coming up." After hanging up, I pulled over and finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for my parents, but for the painful realization that my years of sacrifice for my family had meant nothing in the end. But beneath the tears, a determination was hardening. If Jason thought I would simply fade into the background while he reaped the benefits of my hard work, he was sorely mistaken. I still held one significant advantage: knowledge. I knew the business inside and out. I knew the accounts, the vendors, the customers, and most importantly, I was still listed as financial power of attorney and account manager on all business operations. Jason might have the legal documents, but I had the practical control, and I intended to use it. I spent the next week developing my plan while maintaining a facade of cooperation with Jason. Each morning I opened the store as usual, greeted our regular customers with a smile, and directed my staff with the same efficiency I always had. But each night alone in my apartment, I methodically built my response to Jason's betrayal. My first step was to consult with a different attorney, Patricia Winters, whose office was in the neighboring town to avoid local gossip. I brought copies of all the financial records, emails, and business documents I had gathered. "I'll be honest with you," Suzanne Attorney Winters said after reviewing everything. "Contesting the will would be an uphill battle, especially if your brother was with your father when the changes were made. The law gives people wide latitude to distribute their assets as they see fit, even if it seems unfair." My heart sank, but she wasn't finished. "However, there are other avenues available to you. You've clearly added significant value to the business through your expertise and direct investment. That's called sweat equity, and potentially financial equity given your personal investments. Plus, you're still the authorized manager on these accounts." She slid the papers back across her desk to me. "I'm not advising you to do anything improper," she continued carefully, "but I would suggest documenting everything you've contributed to the business growth over these 3 years. Everything." I took her advice and created a comprehensive record of my contributions. The $12,000 inventory system I had purchased with my savings, the website I had built, the marketing strategies I had implemented, complete with before and after financial reports showing the business's transformation under my management. Next, I reached out individually to each of our 5 employees. They had all been hired during my tenure and were loyal to me personally. "I wanted to let you know there might be some changes coming," I told each of them privately. "My brother Jason has inherited the business, and I'm not sure what his plans are." Their reactions were universally supportive. "We're with you," Suzanne said. Ted, our most experienced employee. "This place was circling the drain before you came back. We all know who really built this business into what it is today." The third component of my strategy was creating a comprehensive list of all the accounts I managed. The main business checking account, the payroll account, vendor payment systems, the automatic monthly profit transfers to my parents' personal account, which Jason now controlled, and the online ordering system I had implemented. All the while, Jason's demands became increasingly frequent and financially larger. "The property taxes on the house are due," he texted one morning. "Transfer $10,000 from the business account today. A week later, need to renovate Dad's office at the store. Send another $15,000. I complied with these early requests, biding my time while completing my preparations. But my investigation into Jason's finances continued, and what I discovered was more alarming than I had initially realized. Jason had not only continued gambling, but had accumulated over $100,000 in debt. He had already spent a significant portion of his inheritance on paying off bookies and loan sharks. The equity loans he had taken out against the properties were not for investments, as he had claimed, but to cover gambling losses. The breaking point came when I discovered evidence that Jason had pressured our parents into changing their will during that final visit. Phone records showed dozens of calls between Jason and our father in the weeks before the accident, often late at night when our mother would have been asleep. One voicemail transcript from our father's phone was particularly revealing. "Jason, I'm still not comfortable with this arrangement. Your sister has put her heart and soul into the business. I need more time to think about this." That same evening, I received a tearful call from Sarah, Jason's wife of 5 years. "Suzanne, I don't know what to do anymore," she sobbed. "Debt collectors are calling our house. Jason says everything's fine, that he's coming into an inheritance that will fix everything, but I found casino receipts hidden in his desk. He's been lying to me for years." I closed my eyes, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. "Has he told you about the will? That he inherited everything?" "Honor, Henner Praysons." "What?" "No, he just said there would be some money coming." "Suzanne, what's going on?" I told her everything. About the changed will, the gambling debts, the equity loans. There was a long silence when I finished. "I'm so sorry," she finally whispered. "I had no idea he was doing this to you. What are you going to do?" Looking at the comprehensive documentation spread across my kitchen table, the evidence of my contributions, the list of accounts I controlled, the records of Jason's deception, I made my decision. I'm going to take back what's mine, I said with quiet determination. Monday morning arrived with the clarity that follows a major decision. I sat at my computer at 5:30 a.m. before the store opened and began methodically executing my plan. First, I canceled all automatic transfers from the business accounts to Jason's personal account. Each cancellation required a confirmation, and I clicked yes, without hesitation. Next, I removed myself as authorized manager from all business accounts, but not before downloading complete records of every transaction from the past 3 years, documenting my role in the business's success. I drafted and sent emails to our major suppliers. This is to inform you that effective immediately, I am no longer associated with Anderson's Home and Garden. Please direct all future communications regarding orders and accounts to the owner, Jason Anderson. I have valued our professional relationship and wish you continued success. Several suppliers responded almost immediately with confusion and concern. We had built strong relationships, and they recognized that I had been the driving force behind the business's revival. I forwarded these emails to my personal account as further documentation of my value to the company. By 8 I had downloaded records of all my contributions to business growth, including before and after financial statements showing the 30% revenue increase under my management copies of the marketing materials I had created, and records of the workshops and community events I had organized that had revitalized the store's local reputation. At 9 a.m., when Ted arrived to open the store, I was waiting with an envelope. This is my formal resignation, effective immediately, I told him, handing him the envelope along with my store keys. His eyes widened. You're actually doing it. What about the weekend workshop? And the Wilson order? That's coming in tomorrow. Jason is the owner now, I replied calmly. He'll need to figure those things out. I've included instructions for the immediate transitional issues, but beyond that, it's not my responsibility anymore. Ted looked at the keys in his hand. He has no idea how to run this place. No, I agreed. He doesn't. I walked out of Anderson's Home and Garden for the last time feeling both liberated and grieved. That store had been my second home since childhood. Now it was just another asset in Jason's gambling fund. By noon, I had secured appointments with 3 small business lenders for the following week. By 3 p.m., I had signed a lease on a small commercial space across town. By 5 p.m., I had registered a new business name, Riverside Hardware and Home, deliberately similar enough to benefit from the reputation I had built but legally distinct. The fallout began almost immediately. My phone lit up with messages from confused vendors who had tried to contact Jason about pending orders and received no response. Several of our regular contractor customers called asking where I had gone and whether I would be available for consultations elsewhere. I hadn't anticipated how quickly word would spread, but small towns have efficient grapevines. By the end of the day, most of our regular customers knew I had left the family store. What I learned next confirmed I had made the right decision. Jason had already approached several of our key suppliers about extending credit terms, claiming cash flow issues despite the business showing record profits. 2 vendors had declined to work with him after uncomfortable conversations about his payment intentions. The most revealing call came from Diane at the bank where we held our business accounts. Suzanne, I'm calling as a friend, not as your banker, she said cautiously. Your brother was just here trying to take out a business line of credit using the store's equipment as collateral. When I asked for the business financial projections, he couldn't provide them. I just thought you should know. Thank you, Diane. I appreciate the heads up. I had expected Jason to burn through the inheritance quickly, but he was moving even faster than anticipated. Then came the discovery that broke my heart despite everything. Sarah called again, her voice hushed and strained. Suzanne, I found something you need to know. Jason visited your parents the day before their accident. He drove them to the attorney's office himself. My hand tightened around the phone. I know about the will change. It's worse than that, she continued. I found an email where he told your parents you were planning to sell the business to a developer who wanted to tear down the building. He said you had already met with them behind your parents' backs. The accusation was so absurd it would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. I had poured 3 years of my life into saving that business. The idea that I would secretly plan to destroy it was ridiculous, and my parents should have known that. He showed them fake emails. Sarah continued, her voice trembling. He created an entire email chain that looked like it was between you and some development company called Riverfront Properties. He even photoshopped documents that appeared to show you'd been paid a consultation fee to assess the property's value. I felt physically ill. That's impossible. How could they believe that? The emails were very convincing, Suzanne. He used your actual email signature and everything. And he timed it perfectly, showing them just before their anniversary trip, when they were already emotional about the milestone. I remembered my last conversation with my parents before their trip. Mom had seemed distant, and Dad had avoided meeting my eyes when I asked about their plans for the store's upcoming anniversary sale. They had been acting strange, but I'd attributed it to the stress of their trip preparations. Now, I understood they had died, believing I was betraying them. Did he admit this to you? I asked, barely able to get the words out. No. I found a flash drive in his desk drawer labeled S Operation. It had all the fabricated emails, the templates he used, everything. He was drunk last week and mentioned something about making sure you didn't get what you didn't deserve. When he passed out, I searched his office. Tears streamed down my face now. The level of premeditated malice required to create such an elaborate deception was unfathomable to me. This wasn't just opportunism, this was calculated destruction of my relationship with our parents. Why are you telling me this, Sarah? There was a pause. Because it's wrong. And because I filed for separation yesterday. The gambling was bad enough. But this is something else entirely. I don't even know who he is anymore. 2 weeks passed. I threw myself into setting up my new business using my industry contacts to expedite inventory orders and set up accounts. The small business loan had been approved based on my impressive track record and clear business plan. Several of our old customers had already found me and promised to follow me to the new location. Meanwhile, Jason was floundering. Without my expertise and relationships, the day-to-day operations of Anderson's home and garden were falling apart. Staff called in sick more frequently. Orders were missed or duplicated. The weekend workshops I had established, which brought in significant additional revenue, had been canceled indefinitely. Then came the text that changed everything. I was in the middle of setting up shelving in my new store when my phone buzzed with a message from Jason. Mortgage payment due tomorrow. Account empty. Need $30,000 transferred as soon as possible. I stared at the phone for a long moment, thinking about our childhood home, the business our parents had built, the legacy Jason had stolen and was now squandering. I thought about my 3 years of sacrifice, the career I had abandoned, the expertise I had contributed without recognition. My reply was 2 words. Not Mina. The pounding on my apartment door started at 7:15 the next morning. I had been awake for hours, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. When I opened the door, Jason stood there, unshaven and wild-eyed. What the hell do you mean, not mine? He shouted, pushing past me into the apartment. You can't just abandon the family business like this. I closed the door calmly. It's not the family business anymore, Jason. You made sure of that. What are you talking about? He paced my small living room like a caged animal. I know everything, I said, keeping my voice level. I know about the gambling debts. I know you manipulated Mom and Dad into changing their will. I know you lied to them about me wanting to sell the business to developers. He stopped pacing, his face flickering between anger and surprise. You have no idea what you're talking about. $120,000 in gambling debts, I continued. Equity loans on both properties within days of the funeral. Lying to Sarah about the inheritance. Shall I go on? You went through my private financial information. His voice rose again. No, I went through the business financial information that I was fully authorized to access as the manager. The business I saved while you were losing money in Las Vegas. Jason's face contorted. You think you're so perfect, don't you? The golden child, who could do no wrong. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up with you? Why can't you be more like your sister, Jason? Suzanne would have gotten an A on this test, Jason. Suzanne wouldn't have stayed out past curfew, Jason. I stared at him, genuinely surprised. That's what this is about. Childhood rivalry. They always loved you more, he shouted. Always. I was never good enough, never smart enough, never responsible enough. When I finally made it into medical school, Dad's first comment was, "That's a lot of student debt you're taking on." Not congratulations, not pride concern about money. So you punished me for their parenting mistakes. I deserved that inheritance, he insisted. You've always had everything come easy to you. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect daughter. You have no idea what it's like to struggle. I laughed without humor. Easy, I gave up my career, my apartment, my life in Chicago to save Mom and Dad's business, while you were gambling away your student loans. I worked 70-hour weeks for 3 years, rebuilding what they had nearly lost. And my reward was to be cut out completely. They promised me, he began. They promised me too. I cut him off. They promised me the store. Multiple times. But you made sure that didn't happen. Didn't you? His expression shifted, a flash of guilt quickly covered by renewed anger. I needed security for my future practice. You needed money for gambling debts, I corrected. And now you've blown through most of the inheritance already, haven't you? That's why you're here screaming about the mortgage payment. A knock at the door interrupted us. I opened it to find my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, looking concerned. Everything okay in here, Suzanne? I heard shouting. Everything's fine, Mrs. Callahan. My brother and I are just having a family discussion. Family, Jason scoffed loudly. Is that what we are now? Because it seems to me like you've abandoned the family business when it needed you most. Real family doesn't do that. Mrs. Callahan's eyes widened at his tone, and I silently thanked him for providing a witness to his behavior. I think you should leave, Jason, I said firmly. Not until you transfer the mortgage money, he insisted. I can't lose the house. It's all I have left. That's not my problem anymore, I told him. You inherited everything, remember? That includes the responsibilities. I'll sue you, he threatened. For sabotage. For abandonment of duties. For what exactly, I interrupted. I consulted with an attorney. I was an at-will employee who resigned properly. I didn't take any proprietary information. I didn't violate any non-compete clause because I never had a contract. You have no case. His face flushed with rage. You think you're so smart. You've ruined everything. No, Jason, you did that all by yourself. Another knock at the door. This time, when I opened it, Sarah stood there. Her expression a mix of determination and exhaustion. Jason, she said, stepping into the apartment. I've been looking everywhere for you. Jason's anger instantly transformed into nervous apprehension. Sarah, what are you doing here? I told you I was handling the business situation. Is that what you call this? She gestured around at the scene she had walked into. Screaming at your sister in her apartment. That's handling it. You don't understand, he began. No, I understand perfectly now, Sarah cut him off. Suzanne told me everything, and I found the rest on my own. The gambling, the lies, the way you manipulated your parents into changing their will. Jason turned to me. You turned my own wife against me. You did that yourself, Sarah answered before I could. 3 years of lies did that. Finding credit card statements hidden in your sock drawer did that. Debt collectors calling our home did that. I was going to fix everything, he insisted. Once I get the business stabilized. The business was perfectly stable when Suzanne was running it. Sarah pointed out. I filed for divorce, Jason. I came here to tell you the papers will be delivered to your parents' house tomorrow. Jason's face crumpled. And for a moment I glimpsed the brother I had grown up with, vulnerable, uncertain human. But the moment passed, quickly replaced by a cold, hard stare. Fine, he said flatly. You're both against me. You always have been. I don't need either of you. He stormed toward the door, turning back for one final shot. "I'll destroy that store before I let you win, Suzanne. Watch me." After he slammed the door, Sarah collapsed onto my couch, covering her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have seen what was happening sooner." I sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. We both wanted to believe the best of him. My phone rang. Ted from the hardware store. When I answered, his voice was panicked. "Suzanne, you need to get down here right away. Jason's just been here and he's lost his mind. He's threatening to liquidate all the inventory at fire sale prices starting tomorrow. He's already called the local paper to place an ad." I closed my eyes. Jason's parting threat echoing in my ears. "I'll destroy that store before I let you win." "I'll be right there," I said, already reaching for my keys. The scene at Anderson's home and garden was worse than I had imagined. Jason had torn through the store in a rage, pulling merchandise off shelves, leaving paperwork scattered across the floor and terrifying the weekend staff. "He kept saying he was going to sell everything for pennies on the dollar," Ted explained as we surveyed the damage. When Maria tried to stop him from dumping the paint mixing station, he screamed that he was the owner and could burn the place down if he wanted to. The custom shelving my father had built by hand over 3 decades ago had been partially dismantled. The vintage cash register that had been more of a store mascot than an actual tool had been toppled onto the floor, its drawer hanging open. The wall of customer photos, 30 years of proud homeowners standing in front of their finished projects, had been ripped down, frames shattered on the tile floor. It wasn't just property damage. It was the systematic destruction of our family history. Each broken item represented a piece of my childhood, my parents' legacy, our connection to the community, and our of Lemon and RM. Customers had witnessed the meltdown. Some had captured video on their phones, which was already circulating on local social media. The reputation my parents had spent decades building, that I had worked so hard to revitalize, was being destroyed in a matter of hours. "Where is he now?" I asked, helping Ted pick up a knocked-over display of light fixtures. "Don't know. He stormed out about 20 minutes before I called you, said he was going to the bank." "The bank?" If Jason was liquidating assets, he'd need access to the accounts. I pulled out my phone and called Diane at First Riverdale Bank. "Diane, it's Suzanne Anderson. Is my brother there right now?" "He just left," she confirmed. "Suzanne, I'm not supposed to discuss other customers' business, but as the former account manager, you should know there are some unusual activities happening with the store accounts." "What kind of activities?" "Large withdrawal requests. Attempt to cash out the business line of credit as a lump sum. He's trying to empty all the accounts." My stomach dropped. "Were you able to process those requests?" There was a pause. "No. Given the sudden change in account management and the unusual nature of the requests, we've temporarily frozen the business accounts, pending review by our fraud department." I closed my eyes in relief. "Thank you, Diane." "Don't thank me," she said professionally. "It's standard procedure when we detect potentially fraudulent activity. But off the record, Suzanne, you might want to get legal advice about your position here. Your brother made some accusations about you that didn't align with what we know of your management history." "What did he say?" I asked, though I could already guess. "He claimed you had been embezzling from the business for years, and that's why he removed you as account manager. But our records show the opposite. The business has thrived under your financial stewardship. The numbers don't support his accusations." Another lie. Another attempt to smear my reputation and justify his actions. The pattern was becoming depressingly familiar. After hanging up, I turned to survey the damaged store. Several customers had stayed behind, helping the staff clean up. Mrs. Wilson, who had been coming to the store since I was a child, was carefully reorganizing the scattered hardware bins. Mr. Petrovich from the local plumbing company was sweeping up broken glass. The Henderson twins, barely teenagers, were sorting through jumbled inventory with surprising efficiency. "You don't have to do that," I told her, touched by the gesture. "This store means something to this town," she replied without looking up. "Your parents built more than a business here. They built a community resource. We all remember how you turned things around when they were struggling. Her words hit me hard. This wasn't just about my inheritance or Jason's betrayal anymore. It was about my parents' legacy in the community. The thought of Jason destroying that out of spite was unbearable. I spent the next 4 hours helping restore order to the store, directing the staff, reassuring customers, and trying to assess the full scope of the damage. The inventory system I had implemented was intact, thankfully. But Jason had compromised several supplier relationships with angry, incoherent calls that morning. As I was helping Maria restock the electrical department, my phone rang. It was Patricia Winters, the attorney I had consulted. "Suzanne, I've just received some interesting information I think you should know about. Your brother's wife contacted me this morning. Sarah called you. I was surprised. We had only spoken briefly before I rushed to the store." "Yes. She's filed for divorce and provided me with documentation that might be relevant to your situation. Financial records, emails, text messages between your brother and your parents. There's evidence here that suggests your parents were misled about your intentions for the business." "I already know he lied to them about me wanting to sell to developers," I said. "It's more than that," Patricia continued. "There's evidence here that your father actually signed a management contract with you 3 years ago, guaranteeing your position and profit sharing regardless of ownership transitions. Your brother appears to have deliberately concealed this document during the estate process." My hand gripped the phone tighter. "I never signed any formal contract with Dad. The document is dated, notarized, and appears to have both your signatures. Your brother had access to all your father's papers after the funeral, correct?" "Yes, he cleared out Dad's home office before I even had a chance to look through anything. I think we need to meet immediately. This changes the legal landscape considerably." As I hung up, Ted approached with a worried expression. "The Gazette is here. They want a statement about what happened." "The local newspaper." Of course they would have heard about the dramatic scene at the town's oldest family business. Carol Jenkins, the business reporter I had worked with on several promotional articles over the years, waited by the front counter with her notebook ready. "Suzanne, can you explain what's happening with Anderson's home and garden? We've received reports of the owner causing a disturbance and announcing a liquidation sale." I chose my words carefully. "The store is experiencing a management transition following my parents' passing. There have been some emotional moments as my brother adjusts to his new responsibilities. Sources tell us you've left the business to start a competing store across town," Carol pressed. "Is there a family feud over the inheritance?" I could see the headline already: "Anderson family business implodes, sibling rivalry turns ugly." That wasn't the legacy my parents deserved. "My parents built this business to serve this community," I said firmly. "That mission continues to be important to both my brother and me, though we may have different approaches to fulfilling it. I'm not going to comment further on private family matters." Carol looked disappointed, but nodded respectfully. "What about the rumors that the store is facing financial difficulties, despite record profits last quarter?" This question caught me off guard. "Where did you hear that?" "Multiple suppliers have reported delayed payments and credit extension requests. The bank has declined to comment, but sources suggest there may be a freeze on business accounts." The situation was spiraling beyond my control. If suppliers began to doubt the store's financial stability, they might demand payment up front, further straining the cash flow Jason had already compromised. Before I could formulate a response, there was a commotion at the front door. Jason had returned, and he was removing his keys from the lock with exaggerated ceremony. "There she is," he announced loudly, pointing at me. "The saboteur who abandoned the family business and is now trying to steal our customers." Carol's eyes widened as she scrambled to take notes. "Jason, this isn't the time or place," I said quietly, moving toward him to usher him away from the reporter. "Oh, it's exactly the time and place," he insisted, his voice carrying through the now silent store. "Everyone should know how you manipulated our parents for years, making them think you were saving the business when you were really just positioning yourself to take over." Customers and staff watched uncomfortably as Jason continued his tirade. I recognized the wild look in his eyes, the same desperate expression he had when calling for money to pay gambling debts. "You've been drinking," I observed quietly when I got closer. "So what if I have?" He shot back. "My life is falling apart. My wife's leaving me. The bank has frozen the accounts because of your interference. I can't even pay the mortgage on my own house." "Your house," I corrected. "Not mine. You made sure of that, remember?" His face darkened. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Walking away, starting your own store, turning everyone against me. Well, it won't work. I'll sell this place to National Home Supply tomorrow. They've wanted this location for years." My heart dropped. National Home Supply was the corporate chain that had been trying to monopolize the local market. They would turn the store into another soulless big box outlet. "You can't do that," I said. "Mom and Dad would never want their store to become part of a chain. Mom and Dad left it to me. Not you," he sneered. "I can do whatever I want with it." As we faced off in the middle of the store, surrounded by the legacy our parents had built, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Jason had already destroyed his marriage, his reputation, and now he was about to destroy our parents' legacy. But I didn't have to let him take me down too. "You're right, Jason," I said finally. "The store is yours to ruin. But my reputation, my expertise, and my relationships with customers and suppliers, those are mine. And I'm taking them with me." Before he could respond, the front door opened again. Sarah entered, followed by attorney Patricia Winters, and a man in a sheriff's uniform. "Jason Anderson?" the sheriff asked formally. Jason turned confusion, replacing anger. "Yes. I have a court order freezing all assets related to Anderson's home and garden pending investigation of estate fraud." He handed Jason an official document. "You're also named in a domestic complaint filed by Sarah Anderson regarding misappropriation of joint finances." As Jason stared at the papers in shock, Patricia approached me with a folder. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "I think I've found a solution that protects your interests and preserves your parents' legacy." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope that justice might actually be possible. 6 months later, I stood behind the counter of Riverside Hardware and Home, watching a steady stream of customers move through the bright, well-organized aisles. The grand opening had exceeded all my projections, with lines stretching around the block and sales triple what I had conservatively estimated. The management contract Patricia had discovered turned out to be legitimate. My father had indeed had me sign papers 3 years ago, guaranteeing my position and profit sharing. In his disorganized way, he had never mentioned it again, and I had assumed it was just another tax document. Jason had found it while clearing out our father's office and deliberately concealed it during the estate process. This discovery, combined with the documented evidence of Jason's misrepresentations to our parents before the will change, had provided powerful leverage. Rather than endure a public legal battle that would expose his gambling and deception, Jason had agreed to a settlement. Anderson's home and garden was sold not to National Home Supply as Jason had threatened, but to a local business cooperative that retained the name and community focus. The proceeds were divided, with Jason receiving 60% and me 40% after subtracting the value of my documented investments in the business. The settlement provided me with enough capital to launch Riverside Hardware and Home debt-free in a larger location than I had initially leased. I had hired most of the staff from the original store, and our loyal customers had followed. Jason had been forced to sell our parents' house to pay his gambling debts and Sarah's divorce settlement. Last I heard, he had entered a gambling addiction treatment program as part of his agreement with Sarah to receive more favorable divorce terms. The bell above the door chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked up, then froze in surprise. Jason stood awkwardly just inside the entrance, looking thinner and more subdued than when I had last seen him. "Suzanne," he nodded, approaching the counter hesitantly. "Jason," I responded neutrally. "What can I help you with?" He glanced around at the bustling store. "You've done well for yourself." "Yes, I have." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, until he finally spoke again. "I'm 6 months clean." he said, not meeting my eyes. The treatment program. It's been hard, but it's helping. I'm glad to hear that, I said, meaning it, despite everything. Sarah told me what you did, he continued. How you could have pressed charges for the estate fraud, but didn't. I shrugged. It wouldn't have brought Mom and Dad back, and a public court battle would have tarnished their memory. He nodded, swallowing hard. I'm moving to Minneapolis next month. Fresh start. But before I go, I wanted to say, he struggled with the words. I'm sorry. For everything. The lies, the will, all of it. The apology sounded genuine, but after everything that had happened, words alone weren't enough. What are your plans in Minneapolis? I asked, changing the subject slightly. He shifted uncomfortably. That's actually the other reason I came. I'm having trouble finding work with the gambling issues on my record. My counselor suggested I get back to basics, establish a steady employment history before trying to return to medicine. I began to see where this was heading, and I thought, maybe, given your success here, you might need help. The request clearly cost him considerable pride. I did grow up in the hardware business too, after all. I considered him for a long moment. The brother who had betrayed me, stolen my inheritance, and nearly destroyed our parents' legacy, was now standing before me asking for a job. The irony was almost too much. I do need a stock clerk for the evening shift, I said finally. It's entry level. Minimum wage, plus standard benefits. Relief washed over his face. I'll take it. There are conditions, I continued firmly. Weekly proof of continued addiction treatment, probationary period of 90 days, and full transparency about your financial situation with our HR manager. That's fair, he agreed quickly. One more thing, I added. You'll report to Ted. He's now my assistant manager, and he hasn't forgotten how you treated the staff during your meltdown. Jason winced but nodded. I understand. As I gave him the new employee paperwork, I realized something surprising. The bitterness that had been my constant companion for months had begun to fade. I would never forget what Jason had done, but perhaps this small step toward redemption would help us both move forward. 1 year to the day after the reading of the will in Attorney Anderson's office, I stood at the podium in the community center, preparing to announce the first recipients of the Anderson Family Memorial Scholarship. The program, which I had established with a portion of my settlement, would provide funding for local students pursuing trades and entrepreneurship, continuing my parents' legacy of supporting practical education and community business. The room was filled with community members, former customers of my parents' store, and current customers of my thriving business. In the back row, I spotted Jason in his store uniform, having come directly from his shift. Beside him sat Sarah, not reconciled, but respectfully supportive of his recovery efforts. My parents believed in the power of hard work, practical knowledge, and community support. I began. They built their business not just to sell hardware, but to help their neighbors build and maintain their homes and lives. This scholarship continues that mission in a new generation. As I announced the 3 recipients, a young woman studying sustainable construction, a returning adult student focusing on small business management, and a high school graduate entering an electrical apprenticeship, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced since before my parents' accident. The inheritance I had initially been denied had evolved into something more meaningful than property or money. I had reclaimed my self-worth, built something truly my own, rather than preserving someone else's legacy, and found a way to honor my parents that no will or legal document could dictate. Later, as the reception wound down, Jason approached me with an envelope. What's this? I asked. My first repayment, he said simply. It's not much, but I'm starting to make things right. A little each month. Inside was a check for $500. A small fraction of what he had taken, but a meaningful gesture nonetheless. The scholarship was a good idea, he added awkwardly. Mom and Dad would have liked it. Yes, I agreed. I think they would. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the devastating moment in the attorney's office to the thriving new business and community program I had built from the ashes of that betrayal. The inheritance that truly mattered wasn't the store, the house, or the money. It was the values and determination my parents had instilled in me. Jason had received everything on paper but had nearly lost himself in the process. I had received nothing tangible, but had found strength I never knew I possessed. I pulled into my driveway, my own driveway, to my own house that I had purchased with my settlement money. Unlike my childhood home, this wasn't a place filled with complicated memories and painful associations. It was mine earned through my own resilience and determination. Inside, I noticed the framed photo on my mantle. Not of my parents or the old store, but of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Riverside Hardware and Home. I stood surrounded by my staff, many of whom had followed me from the old store, all of us smiling with genuine hope for the future. It wasn't a memorial to the past, but a celebration of what we had built together. On my desk sat a stack of scholarship applications for next year's program. Already word had spread, and we had received twice as many submissions as the previous cycle. Local trade schools had begun reaching out about partnerships, and 2 recipients from the first cohort had already secured apprenticeships that would set them on successful career paths. This was a different kind of legacy one, based not on physical property or family name, but on values, opportunity, and community support. It was, I realized, exactly the kind of legacy my parents would have wanted, even if they hadn't understood how to create it themselves. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what's written in a will, it's what you choose to build after the reading is over. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal or disappointment? How did you find the strength to move forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content. And share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes our greatest strength emerges after our biggest setbacks. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worth isn't determined by what others give you, but by what you create for yourself.